Rolling sound, quiet. Here we go. Beat it. 126.7. And starting right when action.
Please rise. Hope and despair. A life without despair is a life without hope. Holding these two ideas in our head is life itself.
See, I'll deliver. I'll be the best father that ever lived. You need me. Even Pop. Pop, for Christ's sake, he needs me. This town needs me.
Man, where I'm gonna get that kind of money? Shit, you talking about? Talking about my life.
They pit the lifers against the new boys, the old against the young, the black against the white, everybody to keep us in our place. I mean, can't you understand that?
I tried. It's just my damnable pride.
Just get away.
And I am going to do something worth remembering with what's left of my time.
A man kills the thing he loves. You keep him away from me. Those paranoid types make me scared.
All right, go ahead.
You want me to hit you?
I want you to hit me with everything you got.
You sure?
All right.
Harder. Come on. Harder. 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 Take it off.
Ah, come on. You want to stop now? That's
Okay.
enough.
Okay.
That
Come on. Come
fuck
on.
around,
Girl,
man.
come on.
Hey, girl, huh?
I'm gonna smack you again. Throw it again.
What does it prove?
God is so many miracles. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I say the right thing?
There's no going back on it. It's going to happen now. This is it. This is the end.
Hi, Chad Matthews coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas with the Lone Star Film Festival. On behalf of the Lone Star Film Society, its board of directors, the Fort Worth Film Commission, and Visit Fort Worth, we are super honored to be presenting the 2020 Bill Paxton Achievement in Film Award to legendary screenwriter and director Paul Schrader. Thank you, Paul, for being a part of this. And we've also got special guest Ethan Hawke, who is generously offered to be part of this film talk, where they are going to talk shop about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. Thank you, gentlemen, for both being here. It means a lot to our organization. Congratulations, Paul, on the Bill Paxton Achievement in Film Award. We're honored to have you. So I will stop talking and I'll pass it on to Ethan. Enjoy the conversation.
I am in an hour north of New York City, and Ethan is.
Well, I'm in Belfast, Ireland.
And is that facial hair for a role?
Yeah. I'm not doing the Tom Selleck biopic, if that's what you were wondering. I'm playing a part, and I have to have this big beard, and I didn't have time to grow a beard. But so you grow the mustache, and it sells the beard. It all looks a little less fake with a real mustache.
Yeah, well, you're lucky to be one of the few places on the planet where they're shooting.
You know, I think there's very few things in production anywhere. Well, how's the pandemic been going for you, Paul?
We're the world's bad boy now, and and I've done all my editing virtually, all my meetings virtually. But now the composer's coming in, and I'm going to have to start commuting to a studio in New York. And
what film are you working on?
What?
What film are you working on?
The Card Counter.
Well, tell people about it.
Well, it's not dissimilar from First Reformed, and it's not dissimilar from one I've just finished. And I guess I'll just sort of explain, and this will probably take a few minutes. In the history of storytelling, film storytelling, the fundamental narrative device was always the cutback, which is another way of saying, meanwhile, back at the ranch, the good guys are doing this, or over here, the bad guys are doing that. And then starting after World War II, under the influence of a lot of existential fiction, filmmakers started to realize that you didn't have to cut back, that you could tell an entire story from one person's point of view, and you didn't have to build tension by using parallel narratives. Now, I stumbled on this writing Taxi Driver because I was referencing Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground and Camus' L'Étranger and Sartre's Nausea, which are all first-person existential narratives. And that has proven for me to be a nice little patch to plant and weed. I've made maybe 5, 6, hoping to make a 7th film in this sort of what I call monocular point of view. You see the world through the one eye of the one character. And if he doesn't see it, you don't see it. And a lot of writers, and particularly studio readers, object to this because you're leaving terrific scenes on the floor because he isn't there. And you're just saying to the viewer, if he isn't there, it's not important. And that's the way we worked on First Reformed. Obviously, there were great scenes between the young couple. There was probably a great scene with Reverend Jeffers talking about you. but you weren't there, and I didn't write them, and we didn't shoot them. And so this kind of character. So it starts out with Travis Bickle and Richard Gere and Gigolo and Willem Dafoe and Light Sleeper and Woody Harrelson, and then the first Reformed, and the new one, Card Counter, with Oscar Isaac. And the latest one I've written in this mold is about a horticulturist called The Master Gardener. And what you learn about how to, a lot of people think this is very hard to do. And I remember I was sitting next to Richard Gere when I was getting an award in New York. And he was commenting on your performance in First Reformed. And he said to me, how does he do it? He doesn't react to anything. And it's not easy, because your impulses is to control, not walk away from a great scene or not meet the challenge of a great scene. And by the way, I think the John Brown thing, the episode I saw, was terrific. And I always have reservations when actors try to go big on film. But the role demanded it, and I thought you pulled it off. So I had trepidation, because I thought, oh man, he's going to do that John Brown thing, like that dreadful movie you did in France. What was it called? What's his name?
Which one? The one that I did in France?
For the famous French director. You had one scene. It was in a bar or something.
Valerian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, no. It's John Brown. He's going to do this. And so I really, really liked it. And the way I tend to work these kind of stories out is you have to start with a kind of occupational metaphor that has uniqueness and resonance. So a metaphor that you don't associate with other things. So the taxi driver was the first one. And then you need to sort of scramble through your life for a theme that you can run alongside your metaphor. A theme that is parallel to the metaphor, that is not part of the metaphor. So, theme of existential loneliness as a taxi driver. Now, previously, people had the cliche of a taxi driver being garrulous and friendly, and turned out on head have him be lonely and dangerous. And then you take these two wires and you run them alongside each other. You don't quite let them touch, but the closer they get, all of a sudden sparks start to fly. And you can never let them touch, because if they touch, they dissolve the energy. So, and once those sparks start going from one to the other, and in the one I'm editing right now, it's the combination of the World Series of Poker and Abu Ghraib. A poker player and a torturer, same man. And all of a sudden you start seeing the connections between playing poker and torturing people. And the moment that happens, the viewer is engaged and he starts making the movie himself. And that is what we all strive toward. Those of us who like to make viewers work rather than, and movies are, of course, a very passive art. And movie viewers are probably the laziest of all artistic users, because, they don't have to do a thing. They don't even have to stay awake. They don't have to stand up. They just sit there and the movie does everything for them. Tells them how to feel, does everything. And so to get them active, you have to start creating anxiety in them, where they have to start putting it together. And so I found, and I kind of hit on this by luck with Taxi Driver, and I'm going back to it. I've used the same outlining method, and it's been working now for close to 50 years. You can't do it every time, but now that I have fewer bullets left in my cinematic belt, age-wise, I'm starting to do it more because this seems to be a very interesting way to finish one career is with these unique handmade films. And so what I discovered is that if you start using a certain techniques, diaries and voiceover, and a refusal to show parallel action, and the simulation of unimportance. So the narration said, I went to the gas station, I filled up the car. Gas was 10 cents higher than it was last time at this year. My brother called, my mother's apparently very sick. Boom. That's it. My mother's sick. I said, that's nausea by, that's l'étranger by Kabul. My mother died yesterday. Boom. And so you get that kind of narration, which gets under the skin. And I call it intravenous feeding because you're getting nourishment, but you can't taste it. And so you start to think it's not nourishment at all. It's not driving the plot like, the film noir narration. It's just random thoughts, and they have to be made to seem random. Otherwise, they'll be important, and they have to be spoken in monotone. Otherwise, they'll seem to be important. And now you're getting under the viewer's skin. And the viewer is now starting to identify because he or she has no choice. If you're just watching someone's life, and in my case, he is an interesting enough person in an interesting enough situation with interesting scenes, you're going to start to identify with them, just like you do with Reverend Toller. And if you can get the audience to identify with one of these guys for about 45 minutes, I think you have to just lay low for 45 minutes. And then you start to veer off ever so slightly. And little abnormalities start to appear. And eventually, by an hour and 15, he has become someone you no longer want to identify with. You began identifying with him, and now he is a jihadist, and you don't identify with that anymore. But you're in for a penny, in for a pound, and you want to know how it's going to end because you've been watching so long, and it's been interesting so long, and it's clearly moving to some climax. Just because you don't identify with its characters' thinking anymore doesn't mean you can stop watching them. And so that sort of creates a schism in the skull of the viewer. What I should be thinking and what I am thinking. And at that point, the filmmaker can do nothing really. He has to let the viewer heal that schism. And how the viewer heals it is the most exciting thing. Because the viewer is doing it. You're not doing it for him. You're not saying Reverend Toller lived or he died or miraculously that or that, and so this is a kind of unique style of narrative that I found myself developing. I don't know how imitatable it is. I've seen other people try it and not quite succeed. It seems easy for me. But then you have the same thing with certain artists like Bresson or Godard, who look so imitatable. And so many people imitate them and they don't succeed. Ozu's another one that people have tried to imitate and just don't, so it is a kind of personal narrative idiosyncrasy. But that is so that's what the last couple of films have been on. So that's really about the narrative and philosophical notion of these stories. It's not, there's a whole other speech about the practicalities of writing.
Yeah, right. Have you been doing a lot of writing? I mean, are you writing the horticulturalist one, or are you editing that one? I wasn't sure which you meant.
I'm editing the card counter, which is the poker player.
I can't wait to see that, but I'm also super interested in this gardening metaphor. That coming out of your mouth surprised me.
Well, he's a master gardener. He's the head of an estate, a private estate, with huge gardens which are open to the public once a week. And he has a staff of 10 people. And he's very, very secretive, lives in a cabin, doesn't like to go out. I also wrote it with the concept of shooting in a bubble, being practical. And he's about 60. There's an old woman who owns the estate, lives in the main house. And the plot kicks in. She has a grandniece who is very, very troubled and is a mixed blood and has been in trouble with drugs. And she asks him to make her an apprentice and teach her gardening as a hope to save her life. And he really doesn't have a choice. Now, so that's one storyline, the gardener who teaches the young girl what it really means to be a gardener, the life metaphors of tending a garden. And there are many of them, obviously, and have been a literary constant for hundreds of years. On the other hand, we learn about him about a third or about 35 pages in. He's in Whitsick. He has killed probably 15 or 20 people in his life. And then he ratted all his friends out. And they were able to set him up. The woman who runs the estate took him in. And he's been doing this for 15 years, unbeknownst. Yet he still is he's a known god, because even if the people he ratted out are dead, their kids aren't. And so this is how he lives, as a solitary person, hasn't seen his own family, never will see his own family. Now he gets this bad girl to take care of him. So now we have an interesting story, because he wears the absolute guise of a pacifist, of a man who can spend hours tending and discussing flowers. But of course, his true identity is an ice cold killer. And so you just run those two qualities next to each other and see how they play off each other.
That sounds awesome. That sounds amazing. Where does your muse speak to you? I mean, how do you have that idea?
Well, I originally was looking for, you're looking for metaphors that are age appropriate. So I was looking for a metaphor of someone who was older. And then you're just cruising around. And, I was watching a gardening show, and I said, that's an interesting job for a complex man, The same thing happened with the card counter. I was just watching poker on TV. And I said, everything they've ever done about poker is so silly and obvious. I should do a film about a man who plays poker, but he plays under the radar. And he come out of jail after 10 years of being in prison for being one of the head torturers at Abu Ghraib. And he plays poker to die, to stay, not to be alive. Because it's just numbers. It's just, when I looked at poker, I saw zombies. Now, other people see excitement, like they do in the commercials. But I saw people who were just sitting there running numbers, just like people who play slot machines. They're just running numbers all day long. And what a better way not to exist, yet seem to exist. If you can go to the casino and spend 10, 12 hours running numbers and then go to bed. And I said, that's a perfect occupation for someone who doesn't want to kill themselves, but doesn't feel they have earned the right to exist. And then, and then something happens. That was a line from Taxi Driver. Every day passes like every day, each day like the other. Then something happens. And so that's what this guy is doing. He's just playing cards, waiting for that thing to happen, which will either redeem or kill him. And yes, and then something does happen. And in the case of Reverend Toller, the thing that happens is the suicide of this young man. And before that, he is just in limbo, And so that's the kind of narrative structure.
Can I ask you a selfish question, Paul?
Yeah.
I got one of the things that happened to me during the pandemic is I got approached by the Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward estate if I would do a documentary about them and their work. And I wonder, what do you make out of Paul Newman? Did you ever work with him? Did you ever work with either one of them?
No, I had dinner with him when Marty and Tom Cruise were working, and I was working in Chicago at the same time. I think Newman gives probably the most important performance in the history of cinema. And I've thought about this a lot lately and been talking about it on Facebook. I think HUD is a landmark. It's the first time an American bad guy has been presented without excuse or remorse, and no attempt is ever made to make him likable. And he has no apology or change of heart at the end. And you can't take your eyes off him. You think he's the coolest thing you've ever seen. And usually in movies, they have some moment at the end where he realizes the error of his ways, or someone else does. And, and Joe Buck in, what's the John Boyd?
Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, well, Joe Buck has HUD on his wall. And HUD and the Ravages, which wrote that script, they thought that because Melvin Douglas is the righteous old father and he's a young kid, and they said afterward, if we had known he would be so loved and likable and identifiable and such an important, we would have written him differently. We thought we were criticizing him.
But that was Paul. And that's the mystery of cinema's relationship with an actor. I just rewatched that film, and it's brilliantly made, and it's so mysterious what's achieved there. I mean, he's just a malevolent soul, and you identify with him completely.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to sell diseased cattle in order to make money.
The opening scene.
He tries to rape the maid. And
He's mean to everyone.
yeah, but just the way he walks, and as when he walks into a room, every woman wants to look at it, and it's just. And in that film, he practiced that walk for quite some time. He lived in the West and wore the cowboy boots and the jeans and hung out. So you could see that he was completely comfortable and a very unique walk he had.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad I asked. Have you do you think with
but when they want you to make a doc, do they want you to do new and recreations and stuff?
No. I'm gonna try to make a documentary about trying to let people know what was significant about their lives, how how it might speak to today. I mean, there's a case to be made. People need some decent role models of two citizens who lived substantive artistic lives and were substantive people as well. Maybe.
When I was a student at UCLA film school, he came there with that film Rachel, which no one would finance, and he had to finance it himself. And fortunately, it turned out well, and he got his money back. But he brought it to the school, and then afterward, the couple of us were walking with him to the parking lot, and he was going to drive off, and he said, what the heck? And we sat there for at least a half hour, and we were all sitting, leaning up against his car, and we were just talking. And it was the most kind of inspiring thing, because he was in a mood to be very, very honest and very self-effacing. And he had just been chastised by making this film that everyone thought he was a fool for making.
It's a good film, Rachel.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yes, I did. I haven't seen it since then. So
I saw it the other day. Her performance is tremendous, but it's a meticulously well-made film. I mean, you can see he's not a extravagant person. It's very meticulously made. I think you'd like it. I think it holds up. It's very interesting to me that the same guy who made that film, that was right around the same year he made Butch and Sundance, and it's in a way, Rachel feels more like it's such an indie film. It's such an intelligent work. It's so different than what you would imagine Butch Cassidy would make.
Yeah, one thing I never understood about him, which was his love of racing. The left turn sport, and he had it his whole life. And it just didn't seem to fit, but it was really a major component of who he was.
It's a major piece of who he was, and his answer to it is pretty simple: is that he was really good at it. And we all enjoy doing something that we excel at. I think that personally, I think that he's a guy who really likes control and can't find it in life. Life is so out of control, and there's so much anxiety and fear. And when you're just trying to do a race, it's like the guy counting the card. It was a way to disappear. Do you ever think of making a film about a filmmaker, like a really personal film?
No, and it's very rare that anyone can really pull that off. First of all, I don't think filmmakers are very interesting people, except in their own eyes. And as a metaphor, it's very cumbersome and hackneyed. And whenever you see it in films, it's like heavy lifting. A better metaphor would be the projectionist. Who watches the directors of watch their films, and then goes home and beats off.
That'd be a good film.
But And also, I've also discovered that the closer I get to my own personal life, the worse I am. I made 2 films about my parents. That's kind of surrogate film about my father and my mother. George C. Scott was my father, and Jenna Rollins was the mother. And they're 2, in my mind, of my weakest films because I didn't have the metaphorical distance from what was happening. And then 2 years ago, I tried to write a film about my brother and my relationship with him. And usually I would never try to write a script unless I knew from the get-go that it worked. And what I knew what the last scene was, what I knew what every single page was. And I didn't know what this one was. And I said, I'm going to write as an exploration. I'm going to learn what this script was about by writing it. And I gave up. About 60 pages in, I said, the script is just getting worse. I'm too close to it, and the character's not interesting enough. It appeals to me in the abstract, but whenever I try it, it doesn't seem to work.
Why do you think, Bergman makes intensely personal films that really work? What do you think the key is there?
He didn't start really making it until later. I mean, he started off with all those metaphors of, ministers and the women. I mean, his greatest film, could be seen to be personal about the persona, which for me is the greatest film of cinema now. I've come around to believing that's the ultimate film. And you could call that personal, but you don't feel it's autobiographical. It's all full of personal junk, but you don't feel, here's Ingmar's story.
But I love Fanny and Alexander, and isn't that personal?
That is very autobiographical, and I haven't seen it since it came out. But I remember not feeling as brutally excited as I did by the ones before. But that's also a memory.
Can I maybe close with one final extremely selfish question?
Which is,
I'm just having an idea. Is there any way that you could think of the horticulturalist as 50 and not 60?
Well, that it's interesting to me that every time I've done one of these characters, I've sought out somebody new. So it's, Bobby and Richard and Willow, Woody, you, Oscar. And Oscar, I was just talking, he just said basically the same thing to me. And and I don't know why. I mean, Bresson had this big hang up about using people twice. And now he didn't want them to act, but he said, I took everything they had. I want somebody new. Now, I don't feel that about the quality of actors like you and Oscar, but I do feel that somehow about myself, that wouldn't it be interesting to use a different canvas? But, that's just one.
No, I think it's true. I think actors bring out different aspects of a director's personality. And the same is true as an actor. I mean, one of the things that's hard when you work with somebody multiple times is figuring out how to access a different part of the well,
Yeah. And, so, but we're at the point with this one where I think, we're in such a weird place now. I sold my film to Focus, and we were guaranteed 300 theaters. we had a call, and basically they said, whenever, they got 4 films in the queue. They don't know what to do with them. They don't need a 5th film in the queue. You want to deliver in January, go ahead. So there's so little pressure to get things done. I said, Oscar Isaac has committed to 8 films. I said, Oscar, how can you commit to 8 films? He said, none of them are pay or play. I'll just keep committing to anything I'm interested in, and finally one of them will actually pay me, and I'll make that one.
I mean, actors, I've never been sent more scripts in my life. It's because nobody has anything else to do. They send you scripts and they want to, but it's there's almost no reason to turn it down because there's no dates. I mean, if it's quality at all, there's no obstacle except that it's probably never going to happen at all. So why offend a good director by saying no to something that's probably never going to happen?
Yeah,
it's a weird conundrum.
Yeah. It's just, a lot of announcements and no start dates.
I know. The only reason this movie I have happening in Ireland is happening because Irish government's making it happen. I mean, I get a COVID test every other day. Everybody's in masks, and they're just hell bent to get people back to work in the country of Ireland.
But I mean, I shot a week under COVID. I went back. I was shut down for 2-3 months. We went back to Mississippi and finished the film up. It's no fun at all.
I know.
I mean, there's no socialization. There's no camaraderie.
It's Saturday night, and I'm sitting here talking to you via Skype. I mean, I got nothing to do.
Well, gentlemen, I think we're about out of time. I have to respectfully disagree with you, Paul. I think filmmakers are incredibly interesting people. You and Ethan were fantastic. Ethan, thank you so much for hosting the 2020 Bill Paxton Achievement in Film Award recipient, Paul Schrader, in this film talk. And Paul, thank you so much for accepting the award. It means a lot to our organization, and we really do appreciate it.
I ran into Bill Paxton. I once we were at some event, and he tracked me down, and he said, I'm the actor you should work with. And I saw what he meant, but it's just it has to be the right guy, and I wasn't making anything or had anything in mind that he was the right for it. And the worst thing you can do for an actor is cast them for not the best of reasons. Just cast them because, and we do miscast, and often we miscast because we need the money. And you're doing nobody a favor. You're not doing yourself a favor. And I remember I miscast a film once years ago, and I called my agent up a week before we started. I said, I think I've miscast the film. I don't think this film could work. And he said to me, how will you know unless you make it? But I knew.
Well, thank you, Chad. Thanks for having us. Thanks to Texas. I hope when this airs, there's a new life to American hope. But we'll see.
And please know you both have open invitations to join us back in Fort Worth when we all get back to normal. So,
all right.
Thank you all.
All right, I'm going to ring off.
Thank you. And that's a wrap from Fort Worth. Make sure to check out Paul and Ethan's movie First Reform, and make sure to check out Lone Star Film Festival content through Sunday. I'm Chad Matthews. Thanks for watching.